Hello, Northern Exposure fans. We are back with yet another Northern Disclosure episode. My co-host, the beautiful, vivacious Janine Turner there in blonde mode this week.
My Rod Stewart look.
Your Rod Stewart look. You look very rock and roll. You look
Even
very
got a little
groovy.
flip at the top, I think
You're right. It's got the kind of spiky thing going on. How you doing, Janine?
I'm great. I'm always better after watching one of our episodes, and I mean that sincerely. It just sort of brightens my life, and you were terrific in this one, so we'll get to it. But your tour de force, Rob, you were fabulous.
Thanks. It was a lot. It was fun and challenging. And we're talking this week about an episode called Jules et Joel. And it was written by Stuart Stevens, who's an interesting guy, is a very well-regarded political consultant, has mainly on the Republican side, or at least until fairly recently, and has consulted with everyone from, he kind of ran Mitt Romney's campaign back in the day and was a consultant to George Bush, and a real interesting thinker on world events. And
It'd be interesting to get him on the show, wouldn't it?
I know. I realized that he only did 2 episodes, and we've done the first one, Brains Know How. Brains Know How.
Right.
Right. And this one. So maybe we'll get him, but he's a great guy, and I'd love to get him.
And a deep thinker.
And a deep thinker for sure. And then this was directed by our pal Jimmy James Hayman, who is just an incredible guy, first of all, and a great director, and started as our DP. He was the first Northern Exposure director of photography, and then this episode is his directing debut. And so I just want to remind the audience that if you are listening, you can also watch us on YouTube on the Northern Disclosure channel, and if you're watching, you can listen in your car, and wherever you are, hit subscribe. And we're so happy you're here with us. Janine and I have been having a great time doing this, and getting to reminisce and hang out with someone like Jimmy is just a great gift. Janine, what's weird about showbiz? Like, we get to bond with people in a very deep, intimate way because the work insists on that. We're up at 2 a.m. We're vulnerable. We haven't eaten. We get connected to people for a long period of time, and then you don't see them for 24, 30 years. And Jimmy, I've seen a bunch, but not enough. So I'm glad he's here. I'll say in introducing him that he is. He's a very, very well-regarded television director. He went on from Northern Exposure to direct and produce shows like Joan of Arcadia, where he directed, 9, 10 episodes at least, and was the director-producer on the show. Ugly Betty. He had me on as director, by the way, on Joan of Arcadia 3 times, and then he went on to produce and direct NCIS New Orleans, where he also had me on as director. And did, I don't know how many zillion episodes, and directed a zillion. And he also is an amazing photographer, which, being that he started as a DP, would make sense. And he told us that he's got a
Rembrandt thing going. He loves Rembrandt, I think.
He's definitely great with light, and we'll talk about that for sure. And he's got a book coming out pretty soon that's of his photographs, so people should pick that up. And I guess without further ado,
no, hang on. We have to talk about the show a little bit.
Okay, you're right.
Rob and Jimmy are great friends, and I think he's fabulous. So, but I do want to talk about the show.
This is the synopsis that I have here, which says it's for Jules et Joel. On Halloween, Joel hits his head in a fall, causing his twin brother Jules to come to Sicily. Jules quickly takes over Joel's personality and professional life. Chris prepares to meet a criminal from his hometown.
Yeah, I thought the show was, once again, incredibly profound. And I texted Joshua Brand, our creator, about it this morning. I said, look, wow, what would have been I didn't say benevolent universe because I don't think he likes that. You know what I mean? But I said, what a genius you were, and what an amazing show. And I'm so glad I was on this journey. And I want to talk about your performance, and we can get into the details. But I wrote down, it would be great to have Stuart Stevens on, because it's hard to know as actors who really wrote what, because sometimes people submit a script and then the executive producers take over and add things. But if you don't mind, I want to read. I thought, by the way, because I think we want to just really focus on you in this episode, but John Corbett was amazing in this episode.
Absolutely. And it was an interesting departure for his character, which I guess is the point of the episode.
Mm-hmm. He was it's all about Halloween, and when, I get the duplicity within all of us, but he was, he really played that vulnerability and fear really well. And fear is one of those really difficult things to handle.
That's what's interesting. That's what I mean by it's like, you don't usually see that in Chris. That's why it was, interesting.
He played it simply, but profoundly. I mean, you could really see what was going on. I just thought it was a terrific performance as well. But here is his monologue at the end, and I'd like to read it. It's not that long, but I love philosophy. I think you do too, Rob. We love words. We love philosophy, and I love Hegel. And this is niche, but nevertheless, the dialectic is referring to Hegel. But here's the summation of the show, which when they started playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and the Kansas thing, I started to get chills. And then when I heard this monologue, I started to tear up, because it just, quote, "There is a dark side to each and every human soul. We want to be Obi-Wan Kenobi, and for the most part, we are. But there's a little Darth Vader in all of us, because the thing is, this ain't no either or proposition, because we are talking about dialectics, the good and the bad merging into us. No, you can run, but you can't hide. My experience, face the darkness, stare it down, and own it. It's like Brother Niche says, being human is a complicated gig, so give that old dark night of the soul a hug and howl at the eternal yes."
Yeah, it's such a great, it's a lovely speech. Yeah, it's really
brilliant. But the darkness that's in with all of us, and we just give the dark side of howl at the yes, and I just thought that was really profound and
it's
everything, because that's what you're dealing with in the jail, with Freud, these two sides of yourself, right?
It's so summed up the entire episode in a perfect way. Yeah, the whole idea, and it's interesting that Joel is going through this now. As I watch the show again, with some relative objectivity, I see the chronology of the characters' evolutions, and it's an interesting one that this is one where Joel starts to get in touch with another side of himself, and he starts to see himself. And I think he admits, you hear him admit to himself, aside from to the fictitious Freud, that he's attracted to Maggie, and he never really owned that before. And so it's a real step. There is a progression of these characters, and it's interesting to note.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And the way I also liked at the end when Maggie O'Connell and Fleischman are having dinner as you were the real Fleischman at that point. And she talks about the night before, which had been your brother, and you didn't know anything about it, but she figures it out, but she didn't judge you for it. She
You're
just
right.
accepted it. And I think that's when my kind of teariness started inside. It was this knowing that she knew what had happened. She was onto it, but she just accepted it.
I clocked that too. I thought, and she was also so compassionate in the I don't know if it's the penultimate scene, but where the Wizard of Oz kind of thing at the end, which by the way is one of a number of times we introduced that motif, kind of riffing on Wizard of Oz in the show. We do it again, but you're so compassionate to Joel, which is nice. All right, so with no further ado, the great Jimmy Hayman.
Woo! There he is.
Thank you. What an intro. I actually was hoping you weren't going to turn me on. You guys were just going to keep talking about the show. It was so interesting. But I'm happy to be here. Happy to be
Well,
here. Happy to reconnect with old friends. It's
you look
lovely.
you look great, man. You look great, and I love that you got the guitars back there. And I'm
Thanks.
glad you're playing.
Yeah.
Um, so Jimmy, you started as our DP, and Josh was talking about Josh Brand, the creator, who was one of our first guests. I think he was our first guest. He talked about how he had seen a movie called Tokyo Pop, and that you were the DP on it. You must have been. I don't know if you were just out of NYU, but shortly thereafter, right? And you went and did this movie.
I just to give a little backstory. When I got out of NYU, I had gone to school with two students who became friends from Hong Kong, and they made a film with a Chinese actor called Chow Yun Fat, who went on to become quite a big action hero. But it was this tiny romantic comedy, and we shot it in Chinatown in New York, and it won a bunch of awards in Hong Kong. It got me to Hong Kong. It was very successful. And then I became known in that sort of indie film world in New York that was burgeoning at the time as the guy that could shoot in the Far East. I'd never been there.
That's
I
funny.
shot in Chinatown. So that got me, I'd worked on a Jim Jarmusch movie. So then Tom DiCillo and I went to Japan and did a movie together. And then I got Tokyo Pop. So I went to Tokyo and I did that. It starred Carrie Hamilton, who was Carol Burnett's daughter.
Oh, that's right.
And it was about a young rocker who goes to Japan, and she's tall and blonde and, very clearly what they call a gaijin.
And so Josh saw this, and then what? He called you in to meet with him?
I didn't meet with Josh. I had a phone conversation with Matt Nodella, actually. And I think it came through Three Arts, a manager there named Erwin Stoff, who at the time was repping my wife.
Right.
And he put me together with Matt Nodella, and I sort of got the job sight unseen. I was thinking I might show up in like really thick glasses with a white cane and like.
Before we get to the directing part of it, can you talk a little bit about, you established the look of the show, and then we had two other DPs that came in, Frank and Gordon, and they kind of built on and did their own thing, but it was all building on what you did, and it was very cinematic, very not traditional TV. How'd y'all get to that place?
Well, I think they were really bold, Josh and John and Matt, and they hired a guy who'd never done television before. So I brought my indie movie look to the show. And because the show was set in such a natural environment, it lent itself to being lit a little bit stronger, a little more contrasty, using light through windows, using natural light, trying not to flatten things out. And I was always a proponent of moving camera and long takes, and that fit well with their storytelling. So, in fact, I noticed the opening shot of you putting your dinner together. It's a long shot of you. You take the TV dinner out, you burn your hands, you get some wine, and then there's a knock at the door.
You're right. Janine's always talking about that. Janine's always talking about the movement, right, Janine? And also she talks about the light. She loves the lighting too.
Thank you.
Well, and the ability to just rest the camera on people's faces, which is missing today. It's this kind of frenetic. No one has more than a second, and so it goes back and forth and back and forth. I mean, Downton Abbey, by the end, this poor actors had like 4 lines. They had to come in like 4 lines and cut. You're into the other scene, and the ability to let that play, and then to go to see, by the way, because we like to stick with the episode. I know our listeners and viewers like to watch that when the devil comes to the door, the trick-or-treater, that was a great scene. And I thought that took its time. Today, that scene would have been cut within the first third. But the fact that it kept going and kept going, and then Rob, when you got sprayed with it was all simply, it was funny, but the nuances, to be able to take the time, I think. And by the way, I just have to say a little something. I have a question for both of you, right? Was that in the microwave, that dish? Because these are the things people catch. You can't put foil in the microwave.
About that? Exactly. I saw the same thing. It was like, whoa, there's tin foil there. That's going to blow up.
That's funny.
Of course, at the time.
Maybe it was an old oven, though. Maybe it was an old oven, like a warm oven.
No, it was a microwave. We just cheated it.
I just think all our old, all the old bachelors on the show were like, oh yeah, microwave TV dinner.
Well, no, in the biz we call that creative license.
Yes, well put.
That was funny, Rob, when you had that hot food in your mouth and we're trying, you couldn't breathe and it was all very, Jim and Rob, you worked really well in directing that little moment. I mean, we can't gloss over these moments.
No, definitely not. I just want to talk a little more about the establishing of the look, because I think it's the one, because we have Jimmy here, and just, was there a lot of, was there any conflict in it with the network or anything? Did they give you a hard time about how it was looking, or did they just kind of embraced it? And
we were lucky the way we morphed into a hit show. Our first 2 seasons were at 8 episodes. We were a summer replacement. People didn't pay as much attention. There wasn't as much weight on success on the show, and then you gained enormous success. And so by that point, they couldn't argue the look, I believe, because the audience was loving it, So I don't ever remember getting notes, to light the faces more or, get close-ups or any of that sort of typical network visual response you would get. I will say that I think our second director was a guy named Peter O'Fallon.
Yeah, he was. Great guy, great director.
Great guy, sort of came from the same background as me, and he really urged me to support my own look, to not flatten it out, to not worry about what the network might say. I remember once we were doing a scene in your office, in the outer office, and we basically lit everything as if it was coming from those large windows. And then I would fill it in a little bit. And we lit the wide shot, and Peter looked at it, and he walked over to the fill light, and he put a screen in front of it to make it less.
Right.
He said, "This is what you want, isn't it?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Well, stand by that." And so I really, once I had support from someone I respected in the world,
right,
then I really embraced it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I remember very distinctly when directors would show up and I would either disagree or wasn't sure what they were asking me to do. I would always look over and get either a head nod from you or a shake, and you were always like my ally. I was like, and if you shook your head no, that'd be like, okay, I'm holding my ground here and I'm not doing it, or I'm agreeing to what they're saying. And so you knew you wanted to be a director at that point?
Well, hang on.
No.
Can we still talk about the lighting, Rob? Because
sure, absolutely.
Interject. Okay. It's interesting, Jim, because at the time I remember being really frustrated that I didn't have more light on my face. You know what I mean? I was like, what's this thing? And why are all my rash showing and all of that? But looking back and comparing it to today when they light and post, which drives me nuts, because it's like we're back to that flat white light you're talking about in a lot of shows on television, where it's just sort of, back almost to the days of Cary Grant and whatnot, when they had those huge lights that just blew everything out. And so I look at that and I'm like, well, I don't like that. That's just every, it's that new HD thing where everything in the room is lit and it's all lit really brightly and it has no nuance.
There are no levels of light.
Yeah, there's no and so I really appreciate more now, what you were doing and the kind of Rembrandt thing that you created, and that you weren't afraid to let it be what naturally it would be. So I just want to say I've grown to really appreciate that. But it's lacking in a lot of, maybe not big time movies, but a lot of these cheaper little movies that they do. They just do this light. I did a movie the week they go, oh, we're not worried about it. We're going to light it in post.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's like they just go turn it up and put the lights wherever they want, and it doesn't. And so you had a real artistry to what you were doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. But I also feel like maybe I let you down a little bit without explaining to you that we were taking great care in lighting you, and that, that we had some maybe little filters going on there. And, we always tried to bounce light on your close-ups.
Became my best friend.
Did
you use any? Did you use any opals?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Black point opals.
You should explain to people what opals are.
Well, there are a series of filters that soften the edges. They soften the light a little bit. So they make it look like it's not a hard light hitting the face, but a softer light that wraps around a little bit. And we always use soft light. We never use, maybe in big shots, we would use some big, edgy lights. But there was a basic classic lighting where you'd light one side of the face, you let the other side of the face go a little dark.
It's Rembrandt.
And then on posing back, you would add a little bit of a rim light to just kick up the hair. And it was a kind of a standard lighting thing, but we always worked out a way to make it seem like it was coming from the lamp, or it was coming from the window, or so that you never sort of looked at it and said, oh, this feels like a studio picture.
So often today, there's light coming in on the actors, but you can't, then on the actor that happens to be in front of the light, you can really see their face. And then you turn around the poor actor that has their, back to the light, and you can't see their face at all. I mean, it's just like, whoa, can I see their face? So you did a really good job of having that kind of artistic Rembrandt artistry look, but we still could see our faces. So I applaud you for that.
I had good subjects.
Well, we had fun. It was the first two seasons. It was quite, we were all fresh, we were fresh and passionate about what we were doing in our own ways.
And I also think that we were a family, as Rob had mentioned earlier in the program, that we were up in Roslyn, Washington. No one bothered us. The closest to a suit coming was Cheryl Block coming up from the company. And she was just part of the family. So we were sort of left to our own devices, and
made it
we
work.
all bonded. We worked hard, we played hard. And as there was a movie years ago based on Medea, where the actress gives this speech that we're a family and we come together, and it's so intense, and then we're dispersed to the winds, And so that adds, if you have that, it takes the work to another level. It did for me.
Rob was talking about that in the opening, how close we all were. And what's amazing is that we've dispersed, but now we're back. And there are a lot of jobs I've done where I wouldn't have this kind of camaraderie or this sense of connection. And we just had really something special going.
Jimmy, I want to talk about, so when you knew you were going to direct, I guess before early on when you were a DP, you wanted to direct?
No, I'll tell you what happened. At the end of the first season, because what you were talking about, how you and I had this connection and you could rely on me, I think that the DP in an episodic show that's part of his job. He's the continuum.
Absolutely.
Directors come and go. You're always hoping they're going to bring something new, something good. But the DP is the one who's there and makes sure that there's a line of continuous.
So when did you ask to direct an episode?
Well, so I didn't. Josh took me out to dinner at the end of the season, and in the midst of the dinner, he said, have you ever thought about directing? And I said, well, no, not until right now.
That's amazing.
And he said, well, if we come back, you should direct an episode. And
Josh was good that way. He brought a lot of people up. And also, I just want to point out that Jimmy Leibowitz, who was our operator, became the DP for the prep episode and the shooting of this, and did a great job. And I think you were encouraging of that.
Yeah, I like the idea. First of all, Jimmy's a DP in his own right, but also keep the family together.
Yeah.
You know, everyone gets a chance to move up.
So this is a big episode for your first time. I mean, you remember how crazy that was?
Oh, my goodness. I will say this before we start talking about specifics of it. Having watched it now, 20 years after we made it, and having been at the time very focused on the visual sleight of hand of having you play two characters, when I saw it this time, I realized what made this episode so spectacular was not that stuff, but was the performances and the writing.
Right.
Because, Janine, you were so honest and thoughtful and truthful in those scenes with Fleischman. From the beginning, where you think he's pulling a ruse on you, through that ending, as you talked about, when you know what's going on and you let him be that, and then Rob realizing it, and you have that first moment of connection at the dinner table. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And Rob,
thank you.
I mean, you just blew my mind. Because not only did you play two completely different characters, which you completely, whichever brother you were totally committed to that brother, but then you had to take it to another level where the brothers exchanged characters. So now you're in a multi-layered performance, and I see all the layers playing. I see your brother trying to be Joel, and it peeks through at times, and then he covers it, and vice versa.
Well, it was a great collaboration. Thank you. You know, and I remember really, you and I kind of in the corner trying to figure it out and trying to find those nuances, because I think that was the hardest part, was when the brother played the other brother and was trying to act like he was the other brother. It was very confusing. But I remember when we first saw the script, the question became, okay, how are we going to do this in a way that's not like the classic Bewitched locked off camera, which to the audience, if you understand in the past, when they used to do a character playing against himself, playing opposite himself, you'd have to lock the camera in place. You'd shoot one side of them in one costume, and then you'd have them come and change costumes, and then they'd roll back the film, and you'd film it again, and you'd get the other side. And as long as they didn't cross that middle line, they'd be okay. But Jimmy was determined, and I think everyone supported you in that, in doing something different. Now, at that point, Michael Fox had done Back to the Future, where he was, playing against himself, and other characters were playing against himself. So there was this new technology. Maybe you could speak of how you got to that.
Yeah. So I lobbied really hard. I felt like in the first scene when Jules shows up, if we could have a shot where they crossed each other in the frame, just as if it was two different characters, two different actors, we would sell that it was real. And there was a new system called motion control camera. So what would happen is using a computer, it was
VistaGlide or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That was the company name, yeah.
But it sounded like really high-end stuff, right? The camera would do a shot, then while the actor changed, the camera would roll back to the number one position, and then through the computer, repeat that shot exactly, moving the camera, tilting, panning, whatever, right? So we did the first half, which I believe was Joel coming in. And we ran the shot.
And we had a double dressed as me, acting with me.
Right.
Well, why don't you talk about that for a second? Your stand-in was doing your double work, right? From behind and all that.
I'm not sure if it was my stand-in. I think it was they brought in someone who really matched me physically. Because my stand-in,
I forget the gentleman's
Peter
name,
never didn't really didn't match
I think
me.
I think we
somebody in.
cast an actor to come in.
Okay, because that's a really important element. Like when you're on your face and you're doing a hug, it was another actor.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll get to that too because he was wearing an earwig. So, but anyway, so just to finish this side of it, we do the first part. Rob goes off to change into Jules. The camera is now going back to number one, and it's nothing more than just a tripod with a camera on a little flat dolly on rails. And I'm watching it move back to one, and it goes past the number one and falls.
Oh, no.
And I was like, that's not gonna work. Well, sorry. So then we had to bring you back and do it again.
Right.
And then we went back. So now it's like, okay, well, I got them to spend all this money.
It was a lot of money. I also think it added 2 days onto the schedule.
Yeah, which is typical for the way I work anyway. But and then you came back as Jules, and you had an earwig, and so you were listening to the Joel
just
dialogue.
for the audience, an earwig is like a little hearing aid, basically that hides
it's something
the ear.
like this, but you don't see it at all.
They don't. Not a lot of people are just listening to this, just so you know. You know what I mean? So Jimmy was pointing to the earphone. So I'm wearing this little ear thing where I'm hearing the playback of myself when we had done it as the other character.
But unfortunately, you're also hearing the playback of the stand-in.
Right.
So So we start the first take. I'll never forget this. And we're like halfway through the take, and you just all of a sudden you just go, I feel like I'm on acid because you're trying to talk over the stand-in and listen to yourself. It was.
And the trickiest part is not only do you have to do that, you have to remember where now there's nobody opposite me. So it's just an empty space. And I have to imagine where, when I was playing Joel, I walked, I sat, I stood, that's where you feel like your mind's splitting in half.
Yeah. But honestly, when we got it, it was flawless. And I think the fact that we spent the time to set that up visually, then from then on, we really did lock frames and over the shoulders for the majority of I think for the rest of the episode. And we had a great stand-in for you. So you bought the over the shoulders without any question.
Yeah.
And the differentiation between Jules and Joel was so distinct and so specific. You just bought it.
Yeah, Rob, let's talk about that for a minute, Rob, because I think there are a couple of funny lines. They love to hear about the script and whatnot, but there was that moment when you are now as Fleisch, your Jules portraying Joel, and you walk through the town and you're saying hi to everybody, and this man walks up and goes, "How are my test results?" And you said, "Oh, you made an A." You know what I mean? And then you go in, and then you're doing your first exam, and you've got the stick in your own mouth, and you want to put it in the other guy's mouth, and you don't know how to do the blood pressure machine. I mean, all those elements were really funny. But I'm curious, Rob, about your choices as an actor. For the New Yorker Jules, for the kind of slick back, that you changed your tone of voice even for that. So I think people would be interested to know about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny watching it, being the critical person I am of myself. It seemed a little too much, and with the distance, if I were to do it again, I would have dialed it back a little. It just seemed a little, but it works for the piece because it's in Joel's head, so I could justify it that way. But yeah, I don't remember who I based it on. You see a little De Niro in there, and I think, Jimmy, there's a moment where I'm talking to the mirror and I'm saying and we're kind of riffing on the
you talking
to me thing.
You talking to me.
But I
It's
think we
great.
ad-libbed that whole. I think we kind of went off like
But that's Dustin Hoffman. Are you talking to me? We're walking here. You're walking.
No.
You're talking to me as De
You talking to
Niro?
me as taxi driver. I'm walking here as Dustin. I'm walking here.
Which you do in another episode.
Right.
Yeah, yes, which we've already done, I think. We'd already did that one, right? But Rob, I thought you had kind of a Hoffman thing going.
I think it's more, it looks like the expressions, and I don't remember, I'm sure if I thought about it, I wouldn't have done De Niro, but like looking at it, I can see my expressions, that kind of like where I'm tilting my head and, that kind of De Niro stuff. But yeah, I mean, the goal was, per your question, Janine, was to, and I think Jimmy, and I talked a lot about this, was really distinguishing the difference. So I did lower my register a little bit, I got into my groin, if you will. He's a guy that comes from his groin, he's sexual predator.
I thought your voice was higher. To me, your voice was higher as Jules. Kind of more nasal.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
At least that's not when I looked at it.
But. And also, I will say that we give the audience that too, because when you first, change over from Joel to Jules, and we have the scene with the mirror, we see you take the time to find that voice.
Right.
And that's where the "you talking to me" happens. And so, we just were very good at bringing the audience along in the process. So they became part of it, At least that's how I felt when I watched it the other day.
It's the story itself. First of all, Janine, what's interesting is that it's one of the rare shows that there's only two stories, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure exactly, but as having watched it this morning as well, the Joel is the A story, but the B story is Chris Stevens. And I think Chris's is in reality and Joel's is in his head.
Yes, but remember when we first shot it, Freud didn't exist. Those scenes were not shot in the initial episode.
What do you mean? I didn't know that.
Yeah. What? So what happened was we shot it as the last.
Let's just explain in case you don't know that. So I get arrested as playing my brother, and I end up in jail. And then all of a sudden, in crazy Northern Exposure fantasy, Sigmund Freud shows up and starts doing sessions with me.
Right. So we shot it as this last episode of season 1. No, I'm sorry, season 2. And they cut it, and they felt like it wasn't working for them. So they decided to add your arrest and the sessions with Freud, because then it made clear that Jules and Joel are just two sides of Joel's personality.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so
which goes back to the Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Darth Vader.
That's exactly right. That's how it all tails together. That's why John Corbett's character and Frank Anderson's character, the bomber, are both the sides of the same person.
Right.
Right. The little guy just wants to be noticed. He sees himself as insignificant. Mm-hmm. He sees John Corbett as being the tall, handsome guy who has everything, and yet John Corbett sees himself as insignificant as well. And so that everybody has these dual personalities.
And that's what I love about Northern Exposure, by the way, not to interrupt, but is the duality of our characters.
Well, I just think that's what says that the writing was so elevated. And I think, honestly, networks didn't think there was an audience that had the brain capacity to embrace stories like this.
Yeah.
And they found an audience of smart, intellectual, not necessarily upper middle class, but people who liked more interesting tales.
We got highbrows and lowbrows. That's the interesting thing. There was a lot of people that the references went right over their head, that they didn't care. They didn't feel like they were being, that it was pedantic or something, but they still liked the humanity of it. And then if you were, intellectually inclined, you could find all this great stuff. I love love the notion that, that part of the kind of idea is getting a break from yourself. That's what Joel needs, is getting a break from himself, only to discover himself.
Yeah. And I think it was an opening for Joel in his acceptance of his new life, because by the end of it, he comes to terms with his attraction to Maggie. And he, in a way that sort of broadens to, he comes to terms that he's living with a group of people that are basically good people.
He comes to terms with his dark side too, don't you think?
Yeah,
because he wants to blame it on his brother all the time.
Yeah. That's the whole thing. And also, what I love is that he says, as Jules to you, Maggie, he says, I'm sensing some subtextual kind of thing going on here, and he's admitting that there's something going on. Like, he's using this disguise, like a mask in the classic sense, to kind of reveal, that they are attracted to each other.
It was through your alter ego, right? When you're portraying Jules, could you show your attraction to Maggie?
That's where you had the confidence to be honest with your feelings.
Jules is all id and Joel is all superego, is what they say.
That's exactly right. And I particularly love when you come to that understanding. You say something like, what I really want to do is liquor all over like a postage stamp. Did I tell you I collected stamps as a child? I mean, it's like so hilarious. But then you look over and Freud's sleeping.
Right.
I just thought it was, and also just the way you gave that line as Jules spoke, you brought this sort of Bowery Boys, Hunts Hall, 30s Damon Runyon vibe to it.
That's a good. That's probably the reference, Janine, that I probably was either unconsciously or consciously drawing on, because I love those movies as a kid, the Bowery Boys movies. And I can see that now that you say it.
And it was such a quintessential New York vibe, those guys. There was an actor named Hunts Hall who was inevitably throwing out malaprops the whole time in this sort of Bronx-ese accent, and I think that he brought Jules into that.
And then Rob, to play Jules, you played Jules as Jules and Joel as Joel, and then you played Jules as Joel. Joel was Jules. And so talk about that a little bit. I mean, having to step into a character that's like Jim was talking about earlier, that you weren't just playing Jules anymore. You were playing Fleischman pretending to be Jules.
That was the tricky part. That was the hardest part of it, was how much Joel should peek through, how much I should be, how good an actor is Joel, how much can he make, so, and I think we did a lot of takes and we would kind of feather in, moments of letting the audience see that it was Joel, and it was just a process of gradations, I think, just trying to just each take trying to figure out what we should add or subtract. And Jimmy was a great, it's amazing that it was your first time directing, because
that was a big show for our first time directing show.
That was a big show. Yeah.
But you know what was great about it? Because of course it's easy when you come from being a DP now you're directing, to sort of hide behind the visual needs of the show because that's your comfort zone. But because the acting and the characters were so complicated, it forced me to not look at the lighting anymore, but to really work with you to find those gradations. And I think that you're right. We did a bunch of takes because I think we decided we didn't want Joel to be too good an actor.
Right.
Because it's Joel, know.
Right.
So, and the audience needs to actually literally be reminded periodically that this is Jules playing Joel, or Joel playing Jules.
There needs to be a little slip every now and then, right?
Yes. So the ability to let the other character slide through in moments was very delicate and very important to the story. I think it worked really well.
But there's certain giveaways that I'm fascinated with. Like, again, I said a few minutes ago that the John Corbett, the Chris storyline seemed like it was in reality versus my storyline was in my head, or was the whole thing in my head? Because when Chris comes out after he gets the threatening call from Frank, played by Raymond O'Connor,
He was
I think
terrific, by the way.
He was excellent.
Anderson.
I remember when he Anderson.
Raymond Anderson, I believe.
I thought Raymond Raymond O'Connor.
Sorry.
But I remember when he showed up, we were all like, "Oh, this guy's great." But when Chris walks out into the office to kind of get some solace from Maurice is so dismissive, and it just seemed
a bomb, just go, just like.
Right, which seems like not what Maurice would do. So it made me think, okay, wait, are they all in my head? But why would I be imagining?
Oh, I see.
I didn't imagine that. I thought Maurice was laser focused on Officer Szymanski.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
He was moving from his groin there. So he didn't have any time to deal with Chris's, neuroses.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It was so great. And with Chris, that the way John Corbett could throw out this poetic, philosophical, genius, brilliant, we all did. We all had these great monologues because the writing was so amazing. But when he's up against the Raymond O'Connor character, I forget his name. Was it Frank? Or whatever.
Yes, Frank.
And he's saying, I'm short. Do you see how tall you are? I'm short. And then Chris in the morning just rattles off all these things. Well, how about Napoleon? How about so-and-so? He was only 5'2" and he conquered all of Europe.
And you see Frank go, okay, baby.
And the way, Jim, talk about the little bomb cables that were coming out of his vest. Talk to us. You must have had something to do with that. Talk about that.
Well, I think we knew we had to show that obviously he was strapped to a bomb, but it was probably a little chilly out, and we didn't want to do the whole vest of dynamite. So, and also it sort of made him a little frailer, being all bundled up with just a couple of sticks of dynamite wires sticking out. And then
he was holding his
he's got the thing, and then. We staged it so he keeps walking around Chris, as he's ranting about his insignificance and his size. And I just thought it was delightful. And John was so sweet to this guy. He was so gentle. And it was a side of Chris that I'm not sure we had seen before.
No, that's what I think the point of the episode is, that both of these characters reveal stuff. How about Marilyn the way she clocks Jules? I mean, she's just so onto him.
Well, he says, bring the next patient, and she just looks, and she's got that lollipop in her mouth. Right. And she just goes into the hall and goes, number 6. Josh Brand could not get enough of her. He just thought she was... he had that vision. He saw what an integral part she would be to that show, with very small, tidbits of humor, subtle humor. It was,
Well, and I loved the moment too when Darren Burroughs, who played Ed Chigliak, comes up and he knows instantly, Rob. Right. What is it? You were Jules trying to play. You were Joel trying to play. You were Jules. I don't know at what moment, but he picked it up. He knew. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, he says it's an Indian thing.
Yeah, we don't get lost in visages.
Right.
So he knew that who you were portraying to be wasn't the real you, because he could read your real soul, and then Marilyn could do that as well.
Right. And then Elaine is the same way, and Jules says to Elaine, and she just nods, Yeah. But that part of a storyline that has that sort of esoteric sensibility of nativism, and Native Americans, and that that they're different groups of people that see things differently, and we should embrace this, you know.
Yeah, that comes out in the series a lot, you know. I
Yeah,
mean, it was a really they definitely honored the native culture, which I love, and it's great to remember that as I watch it and get reminded of it.
right.
Rob, did you have fun playing the two different characters? I mean, really kind of being, yeah, I will just say that I played this kind of hardcore natural Maggie all the time. And when I when I had the opportunity to have a dream or a flashback or play an Eskimo and with long hair in an igloo or to be sexy, I really loved to have that opportunity to look different. And it was so interesting as an actress. It's not this just CSI thing every day. Did you really enjoy, Rob, being able to kind of turn on the charm and be this kind of cool? It's so opposite of what you were playing daily. That must have been fun.
Yeah, it was absolutely. You know how it is. It's like no matter how interesting the character you're playing on a TV show, monotony sets in relatively quickly because, you're doing the same thing over and over. So when we would be given these chances to do something different, it was always fun. But, the challenge is we're doing it on such a short schedule because for the audience, we get these scripts, if we were lucky, they were pretty good on Northern Exposure in terms of getting us the scripts in advance. But it usually was 4 or 5 days maybe where the actors would get the script and start to be able to look at what they were being asked to do. So I probably had 4 or 5 days to think out with Jimmy to figure out how I'm going to play another character. And play my regular character while I'm shooting the previous episode. So it's really taxing, but I don't remember ever thinking I wish I didn't have to do this. I mean, we'd rise to the occasion, but it was a good thing we were young.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, even now it's challenging. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
But
it's
there
so
is
much
that
fun.
thing when you're doing an episodic show, because I've run a bunch of shows now, that there's the redundancy, that sense of, oh yeah, okay, we're going to do this now. And so when you're given the opportunity to stretch out in another direction, as daunting as it might seem, everyone gets juiced. One of the great things I found in Northern Exposure, I tried to carry it on in other shows once I started producing, was everybody read the scripts. Everybody was invested in the storyline. The dolly grip would be, literally would say, well, maybe we should move on this line. Wouldn't that be nicer? Everybody was doing their best work. Everyone's job was the most important. And I think I tried to carry that on through my career. I think it's very important. Like,
how did you do that? Did you say to the team, be sure to read the script?
In so many words, I said, what I used to say was, look, if I think as a director, as a producer, I'm going to see everything, I'm kidding myself. So I want everybody to be involved and bring ideas, bring thoughts. And of course, I'm an egomaniac, so I'm the one who's going to make the decision. But I want that involvement. And so I think once you give license to a cast and crew to do that, it just elevates the work.
Because it empowers everybody and everybody feels important. And I think that starts to happen to actors later in a series run where actors have grown and they want to direct or they want to change their characters a little bit. And then sometimes you get stifled. We're like, no, you got to remain exactly the same. But wait, I've grown. But so it's hard, but it's really empowering that you gave them that sense of collaboration where they felt that, oh, I'm doing more than just pushing the dolly. I can maybe have an impact of where pushing the dolly. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. I love collaboration. It's one of my favorite words.
Yeah, and I also think that we were lucky because, first of all, as I said earlier, we were off by ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we just did what we did.
You didn't have a bunch of executives breathing down your neck.
Right. But the writers were very open to questions and adjustments. I've been on other shows where, no, there's a comma there. You have to pause for a second, where they are ironclad, word specific, which is stifling.
And then I've worked on shows where it's all improvisational. It's all improvisational. Well, they'll let you just be improv. Just go ahead and improv.
I don't. That makes me nervous a little bit.
I know. Well, like I was on Friday Night Lights, right? For this season 3, and then I worked with Robert Altman in Dr. T and the Women, and they were both completely improvisational. And my first thought was, well, I feel sorry for the screenwriter, the script writer. But the second thing is like, how do they edit this? There were no matching. They didn't care. They had 3 cameras. How they edited something like that, I have no idea.
As Jack Nicholson said, matching's for sissies.
Yeah. My first job at a film school was with Robert Altman.
Oh, that's you're right. Kidding. What was it?
Yeah. He directed 2 one-act plays called 2 by South. There was a playwright out of New York, Frank South, and one of them had Alfre Woodard in a solo performance, and the other, I don't remember the male actor, and it was for a fledgling cable network called ABC Arts, which didn't last. But I remember that at the end, we had a little party when we did the last shot, and my job basically was to take a big black and put it in front of a light and make lightning through a window. That was my job. He was directing, and we found each other standing next to each other, and he did all these amazing shots through mirrors and moving camera.
Talk about long takes.
Yeah, right? And I was complimenting him on it, and he said, yeah, I don't know, Jimmy, do you think that last shot in the mirror really is going to work?
Well, it's funny. I think about this every single time I start a project. I was at a dinner in a restaurant in a private room, maybe 12, 15 showbiz people. I'm next to Robert Altman. Dessert comes, he pulls out a joint in the restaurant, lights it. We start smoking. So he and I are passing the joint back and forth. And I got really relaxed. So at some point, we were talking about everything. And at some point I said, why do you make movies? The way a stoner would say, like, why do you make movies? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and he said, for the sole experience of making them, period. Mm-hmm. And it's something I think of every time because he's made masterpieces and he's made some not great movies, but every time I run into an actor or someone who worked with him, they say it was the greatest experience of their career. Mm-hmm. And so it was because he set that tone, as you're talking about, where everyone was there to have an experience. It wasn't just because you were a dolly grip that you couldn't sit in, or you were the black guy was creating lightning. You couldn't talk to the director about a shot. And I think that's a great thing to keep in mind.
I think that is a good thing to bring to mind every time you start a project, because it is that. This brings us right back to the beginning of this conversation about how we created this family and everyone felt part of the process. And what we remember now is we look at the work and go, wow, we did some pretty damn good work there. But in the middle of it, we were just enjoying the process,
Yeah.
and giving each other the room to create,
Well, we have to wind it up.
Okay.
But I just want to say, first of all, it's been so much fun. I feel like we could keep going. But I have this real distinct memory of being on the street on the last shot of the episode, and you and I kind of falling into each other in a hug because we were so exhausted, and we knew we got through it. We didn't know what it was going to be, but I just really remember that. And
I remember that as well. Yeah. There is that amazing, like, finally all the tension in your body kind of sags a little bit, like, we did this.
I love completing things. I love when I get in the car and it's over and I'm like, I'm done. Because, right, Janine, this pressure, even if you look calm, cool, and collected, there's an anxiety, a performance anxiety, even if you're a director or DP, not just an actor, but that it's in you. And until you're released from that, there's a pressure.
Well, there's kind of a heightened adrenaline rush, where you know what you have to get through, and the long hours and the long days and the lack of sleep, and then having to. I think that one of the things that's so amazing about what we do is it's especially from an actor standpoint is okay, 1, 2, 3, action. And you just, boom, have to have it. And that's one of the things I remember learning with both of you on the set is like, how do I go sit in my chair in the corner and get into where I need to be? Because I was trying to bring that kind of emotional levels and whatnot to my performances. But there's such a heightened anxiety and then there's a letdown when it's finally finished. And I always find I don't know what to do with myself when it's over, A, or B, I get a cold. You know what I mean?
Always get sick. Always get sick. But I think that was really accurate, Rob, that directors, DPs, everybody has performance anxiety, whether you're in front of the camera or the back. I mean, that's just part of our, sort of collective neuroses, I think.
Because everybody says action together, right? If you're pushing the dolly or holding the light or whatever, it's this sense of performance on action. And I remember one of the craziest things that I remember to this day is when I wanted to try to get to that emotional level, right? And I might not be there yet. And I'd say, can I just have a few seconds? And Jim Charleston usually, right, would say, yeah, okay, everyone just give Janine a few seconds. And then the pressure was horrible, right?
Worse.
Everybody got really, really, really quiet. And they're all like waiting for me to like get to this emotional state.
Yeah, if he had just quietly, said, sure, take a minute,
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on. I hope we can get you on again. It's just
I'd love to. This is so much fun. So much fun. And I just want you to know that I got a call from a old friend in Boston who said that she's loving your show. Just loving the podcast. So you're doing good work.
Well, you brought it to light.
Brought it to light. That's a good phrase.
You're right.
I like it.
Maybe that should be the title of your book.
Could be.
Bringing it to light.
I'm going to take it.
Yeah. Glad I could collaborate on that process.
I'll give you your due.
No, you don't have to. No way. It's okay. So next week, we're going to have another great episode. So for tonight, I say good. See you later, everybody, from O'Connell and Fleischman.
Yeah, actually, I think it should be Fleischman O'Connell.
In your dreams, Fleischman.
Northern Disclosure is a production with Evergreen Podcasts and executive produced by Paul Anderson and Scott McCarthy for Workhouse Media.